For us to go live. How you guys doing? Good, really good. We good? I was just getting ready to, but it just went like this. All right, so for everybody here knows this, but we're going to broadcast this because our people catch it online. We don't do the RSVP thing anymore, as you all know. We have not all of our chairs out yet. We could bring them all out, but we're still kind of trying to do the social distancing thing a little bit. So we have chairs here. Just come on. You don't have to make a reservation for those of you who are doing it. Although I don't know, we seem to be getting more people out when we made them make reservations. I guess we were exclusive, you know. So now anybody can come. Oh well, I'll go anytime then. I don't, but now this is actually Father's Day. I'm glad to see the fathers who are here. Usually in churches, Mother's Day is packed. Father's Day is sparse. Because when they ask, Mom, what do you want? You know, I just want my whole family together with me in church. Yes, Dad, what do you want? I just want to sleep in. So that's usually the difference between Mother's Day and Father's Day. But anyway, so that's going on. I don't think I have any announcements to add, do I? Just 4th of July, don't come here. That's the Saturday. We're going to be doing other things, so are you. So go ahead and do that. Vika, could you get me a little piece of paper or a Kleenex even. I'm going to get rid of my gum. I used to have this little cup down here. It was like my gum cup, and she cleaned it out. And she goes, don't ever do this again. It was disgusting. I'll just throw it away. It's okay. My little spittoon. This, the gum actually clears my sinuses. This is why I use it. Yeah, come. Okay. So, tell you stories. I got to tell you this while we're waiting. And she's getting me water. So my father was a preacher, right? And one day, I don't know why, he stands up for Mother's Day. And I guess my mom had said, hey, don't forget to recognize Mother's Day. And my dad hated to be told what to do anyway. And so he stands up in the pulpit and he ushers us in that day by saying, today is Mother's Day, but we are not here to honor mothers. We're here to honor God. Please rise and sing. It didn't go real well, not in our house or any house. And so Father's Day came around, and he said the same thing for Father's Day. We're not here to honor mothers. No, he said we're not here to honor fathers. So that's why we let Alexandra do that. So we don't have anything, right? I have my water, got rid of my gum. How's my collar? My collar's down? Okay, let's get started. We are on week 7 of the Survivor series. We're taking a game show Survivor. We're comparing it with the book of Daniel. This is a re-preach for me. We did this in 2014. Now, what's nice about that is all my slides are already made up, so I don't have to find clips and artwork and everything. It just makes things so much easier. Except for this one. This one wasn't there. I don't know why. I went to get it, and so it just wasn't there. So we had to rebuild this one from scratch, and so I re-listened to my sermon from 2014, which I usually do just to kind of figure out where I was at the time. It is interesting to see how my theology has kind of changed since our first year as a church. Things have changed in me, and I hope in you as well. But this one changed quite a bit, and I'll tell you where the pivot happens. But first of all, today is about the immunity challenge. Specifically, it's about the idol. Now, in the game of Survivor, finding the immunity idol is a joyous experience.
This is huge. I needed this. Ooh. Ooh. Oh. Oh. Oh.
This is called hamming it up for the camera. That's the great Tony Vlachos, the only male 2-time winner of Survivor. This is huge. Now, in the game of Survivor, it's a wonderful thing to get the immunity idol, because that means you can't be voted out because you have immunity. It's a different story in the book of Daniel. It's exactly opposite, in fact. So we're going to pick this up. Now, this is one of the probably the one of the 3 stories everybody knows from the book of Daniel. It might be the most famous story in the Bible. If you went, like I did, you grew up in a Protestant church. We went to vacation Bible school a lot and Sunday school. This would be the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, those of you who grew up like I did. Also sometimes called the story of the fiery furnace. You may have heard that. Those of you who went to Catholic, hopefully they cover this in your CCD class. It's a kind of a famous story. And it's always kind of preached, I think, the same way. I've heard it dozens of times. And when I preach it in 2014, I preach it the same way I always heard it. We rush past all the details to get to the end because the end is amazing in this story. God comes through in this huge miracle. But as I was redoing everything and kind of praying over, do I want to really pre-preach the same sermon, I realized we kind of missed the point. This is a story told in 3 acts. Kind of spoiler alert if you've never heard the story. There's 3 acts to this. The first act really can be summed up this way. Your faith comes in conflict with the world's desires. Okay, that's Act 1. Act 2 is the faithful's response to that. And Act 3 is the consequence of that. And what we want to get to in this case is Act 3, because what happens is cool. God steps in. God does a miracle. But it occurred to me that about 3 chapters from here, this same story is basically retold. The difference is the conflict's a little bit different. Act 1 changes. Act 2 stays the same. Act 3, we switch out the fiery furnace for a lion's den. But it's basically the same story other than that. And I thought, you know what? We could interchange Acts 1 and 3 all the time. Because there's many things that will bring you in conflict with the world. Your belief will, and in fact should, bring you into conflict with the world. Now, it isn't always a king saying, I'm going to kill you if you don't. We don't have that yet. Who knows where we're heading? I can't even tell you. But we don't have that yet where a king's going to kill you if you don't, compromise your beliefs. But you have other things. Some of you may have had a boss at work, didn't like to hear about it. You may have had other things going on. Who knows? Maybe a Twitter mob coming after you because of your beliefs. That could happen today. It could be someone you love. It could be a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a fiance, right? Want you to compromise your beliefs. And so then that puts you into Act 2, where you have to make a decision as a believer. And Act 3 then changes depending on what you do. You could lose a job. You could, suffer humiliation at work or something. You could lose your boyfriend, girlfriend. You can lose your fiance. It's possible. You could lose a family member. So Acts 1 and 3 change, but Act 2 is kind of the critical point. So something really rotten today. I'm going to stop the story in Act 2. If you want to know how Act 3 finishes out, read it yourself. Daniel chapter 3, but you guys already pretty much know that. I'm going to stop at Act 2 because I think the way Act 2 shows us here, God kind of slows down the action and lets us see something very important. So here we go. Nebuchadnezzar, who is the king, made an image of gold, big idol. It was 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide. Cubits isn't a term of measurement that we use anymore, but it was basically the term of measurement from an average man's tip of his finger to his elbow. So they considered about 18 inches. So that'd be 90 feet high by 9 feet wide. That's a big stinking idol. You're going to see that for a ways, right? And he builds it on the plain of Dura. The plain of Dura, as you might imagine, is flat. So you put an idol 90 feet high, you can see it from a long way away. And King Nebuchadnezzar sent word, and he gathers up all these people. And it doesn't matter if you know what a satrap is or an administrative governor's counselors. The point is everybody of importance is gathered up for this dedication of this idol. And they came there, and he had set it up, and they all came. I'm going to skip over the names of all the people who came from all the provinces gathered there. So Babylon's an empire, right? It spreads out over, what they've done is they've conquered smaller kingdoms and made it this big empire. And so this is the province of Dura, and it has multiple kingdoms that were there. This is kind of important. I'll get to it in a minute. And they're all going, all the dignitaries from that area are being brought for the dedication of this huge statue. Huge, it's huge. Okay? And then they say, okay, you're going to all stand before this idol, this image, and a herald cries out, to you it is commanded, to everybody here, all you peoples, doesn't matter what language you speak, in other words, doesn't matter which country you come from originally, because you're all Babylonians now, at the sound of the horn, and it goes on, everything's going to be played, a horn, a flute, a harp, a lyre, psaltery, and a whole symphony, so basically with a big orchestra there. When you hear the sound of the music, you will bow down and you will worship the idol that Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And if you don't, we've got this burning blast furnace set up over here, and we will burn you up. That is the conflict. So, at that time, when all people heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, and the symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, all the nations, all the languages fell down and worshiped the gold image which Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Okay, so this is the setup. We're going to all come down. Now, why? What's going on here? Because there's one thing that really is bizarre about this story. Daniel's not in it. This is the book of Daniel. It's written by Daniel. But this story doesn't take place anywhere by Daniel. Daniel's not here. And I thought, that's weird to me. This actually happens twice in the book of Daniel, but I understand, we'll get to the next one next week. I understand the next one, because it wasn't even written by him, I don't think. It was just included in the text. But this one's weird, because he's not there. And it's weird to me that he's not there. Look at all these people who are there. All the important people are there. Why isn't Daniel there? It's a kind of a mystery, and people have debated it for years. What's going on? Is Daniel there and he gets a pass? Or is Daniel there and he actually bows down to the idol? Because we never get talked about Daniel. I don't believe Daniel was there, and here's why. Because it bothered me, and these things bother me. So I actually did a lot of research on this, and I found a guy who wrote an ancient Babylonian historical text. I think it was his first doctorate dissertation or something. And he's not a theologian, he's a historian. And what he's saying is actually happening here, the Bible is one of his points of reference, but not his only reference, is what happened was there was a revolt. And this happens, you know. So what goes on is these empires, is they conquer the kingdom. And then they say, okay, we'll let you stay a country, but you're going to pay us money. It's called tribute. And this goes all the way up into Rome. We see the same practice. And it's easier to control the crowds if you leave their king in place. Or somebody maybe I put in place, but it's their king, right? And so the king actually collects the taxes and does all the dirty work and passes the money off to the kingdom, which is all at once anyway, because it has to pay for things. Rome does this. That's why Herod's the king in Rome, but really Caesar's in charge. So what's going on is the same thing here. Well, every now and then, these kings that come into the kingdom say, well, I don't want to pay tribute. And they'll band together and they'll say, look, if you don't pay and I don't pay, and he can't do anything to all three of us. There's no way. We actually see this in the very first series, sermon in this series, where this is exactly what Hezekiah tries to pull off. Band together with a couple of kings and says, well, let's all not pay. And that'll be the end of that. Well, Nebuchadnezzar rolled out his army and squashed the rebellion, according to historical records. And that was taking place right here in the plain of Dura. So what the historian believes he's doing is he's putting up this huge statue and making all the new kings they put in place, because they killed the old ones, bow down and swear loyalty to the god of Babylon, so everybody knows we're on the same page here. Right? So this is actually a bit of a humiliation of the kings, is what's going on. And the reason they think that is, although they didn't find this statue, they found another one. It seems to be modus operandi for Nebuchadnezzar. So the reason why Daniel's not there is because he's not a governor of any of these provinces. He's back at the palace doing his job. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, those who were here last sermon, got promoted and became the governors of these regions. So they have to be there. This is mandatory attendance. So they are there. I don't think they had any idea what was about to happen. Hey, you need to go. We're going to dedicate a statue. Okay. Yeah. One of the boring jobs that I have to do as governor, a little ticker tape parade, have to cut the ribbon, whatever, we'll be there. And all of a sudden, they're standing there, and the herald sends a trumpet and says, now everybody's going to bow down to this. And they went, what? This wasn't what we thought we were here for. And they don't have any time to prepare. They don't have a chance to talk amongst themselves. They just said, whenever you hear the music, you've got to bow. Now, at that moment, I don't know. What do you do? You haven't a chance to thought about it, right? You don't know. All of a sudden, and not only that, everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing it. And if you don't do it, you're going to get burned to a crisp. Now, again, we know how this story ends. They don't. They're living it, right? They're sitting there right now saying, well, we can either bow with everybody else or we can get burnt. Those are our two choices. So what would it take for you to bend your knee to an idol? I think a lot of Christians would do it. I'd like to think I wouldn't, but there's a lot of pressure right there. So what happens is everybody goes, and without any kind of a prep or anything, they all bow down, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stay standing. Now this is a plain. Remember, that's flat. There's no hiding. Plus, in fact, they're probably close to the front because they were dignitaries. So everybody sits down and they're probably looking at each other like, wow, did not expect this. Right? But they do not bow down. So the Chaldeans, remember them, they were the magicians that were replaced by Daniel and his three friends because they were fakers, and Daniel and his three friends actually had passage straight to the living God. They see their moment to pounce, and they do. They come to the king and said, "Oh, king, live forever," because that's the way you appoint, address kings. "You, O king, made a decree that everyone who hears the sound, the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, the psaltery, the symphony of all kinds of music shall bow down, and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast in the midst of the fiery furnace." But there are certain Jews who don't seem to have done that. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these men, O king, did not pay you due regard. I don't know if you noticed it, because it appears as though Nebuchadnezzar bowed too. So everybody bowed down. So you may have missed this, king, but those three didn't. They don't worship your gods, and they don't serve your gods. You can't trust them. You need to put us back in charge. Now, listen, I'm going to use their Jewish names here for a moment, because their Babylonian names are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I almost hate to use them because they're not Babylonian in their minds. They're Jewish. So Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they weren't there to make a scene. They weren't trying to embarrass anybody. They weren't trying to make a point. This wasn't a protest. This is just, wow, you guys are going to bow before that God. Well, we can't do that. So the king now gets very upset. But I want to show you how he gets upset, because I think it tells us a little bit about what's going on here. He gets rage and fury, gives the command to bring them here. Let me bring these guys here. And they get him before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar speaks to them and says, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image which I've set up?" Well, of course that's true. Neither did Daniel. He knew that. But he's like making a scene. I want to show you why. He says, "Now, if you're ready," don't think you guys heard the announcement, or maybe we caught you off guard with the music. So I'm going to bring you back here and give you one more chance. If you're ready, we're going to sound the music again, because apparently you didn't hear it. We're going to give you one more chance here. I want you to see that Nebuchadnezzar is trying to help them out. See, I believe that why he's angry, why he's upset, was he never thought they'd be the problem. His concern were the other kings that he's going to humiliate. He never thought they'd be a problem. They'd been his best governors. They were terrific. The people loved them. They did great. Under their leadership, Babylon, the parts they were taking care of, flourished and made lots of money. They were the good guys. They've always been on his side. They've never created a problem. He was shocked to find them. You must not have heard it right. I need you to do this, because if my governors aren't going to bow down, how am I going to get those kings to bow down? You need to do this. So if you're ready, we're going to do it again. I don't want to repeat that. I'll let you take a breath. Get ready, think about it, and get ready to do this, because if you do not, I'm going to burn you. You need to know that. I'm not kidding around here. I made a decree. I can't be embarrassed in front of my people. I will burn you. And then he adds by this, he says, and what God will save you? I know your God's really impressive. He figured out my dream a couple chapters ago. That was great. But what God's going to save you from this? I'm going to put you in that furnace, and you're going to burn. So I want you to think about it, get ready, and prepare yourself to bow down. Okay, so your choice is, you are a governor in the palace, or you are an ash heap in the furnace. Those are your only two choices. Now, again, we know how the story ends. They don't. Do you think at some moment they're saying, well, wait a minute now, let's talk amongst ourselves. He's given us a moment to think. Is this really what we should be doing right now? I think there are an awful lot of Christian teachers today that would say, no, you don't do that. Don't lose it now on a stupid stand that doesn't mean anything. There was a song years ago. He didn't lift us up to let us down. He didn't bring you this far to drop you now. Didn't he take you from slavery to the palace? Didn't he promote you above everybody else? Aren't you doing good work where you are? You're honest, you're truthful. There are people who are alive today because you've been an honest governor. You are blessing the people. And really, honestly, Let's think this over. I Googled how to make hard decisions. I did because I just get curious. And basically, I'm going to take everything I got from all these websites, most of which were Buddhist, and I'm going to put them into kind of a context of what they must have been thinking. Let's look at the big picture here. Why did God bring us here? Clearly, he brought us here for a purpose, and the purpose wasn't to get burned in an ash heap. The purpose was to be good governors, right? How does it impact my family? That's a good question. It's not just me involved here. You know, I have loved ones too. How's it going to affect them if I do this now? What about my goals? I have a lot of things I've got in work here, which are good things and moral things. That's my ministry here. Why am I going to throw it all away? And I love this one. God looks at the heart anyway, right? I can bow down and keep my heart pure. I can do that. Let me say a prayer first. I'll say, God, I'm going to do this so I can continue doing your good work here. But I will do that. But actually, none of that even matters. I don't think they asked themselves one of those questions because they had already decided way, way, way back in Daniel chapter 1, we will never forsake our God. And they had made that decision, and they had made that part of their life, and they had lived that way from that moment to this. So the way they react wasn't with thought, it was with instinct. We see this happen a couple times in the Bible. We see David do that when he sees Goliath the first time. He just instinctively reacts. His heart is so aligned with the heart of God that his instincts are God's instincts. That's what's happened here. Because they've been through the small test. They went through the food challenge. That was small compared to this. The dream challenge wasn't even as big as this. They've been through many, many challenges already. And every time they stay true to God. So now their instinct was to stay true to God. Because this is the thing. Compromise begins the moment you try to make your God fit your circumstances. You want to know where compromise starts? That's it. I see what God says, but he doesn't understand my circumstances. So I'm going to modify what God says to fit my circumstances. That's what we do. But the problem is that some decisions will define you. Some decisions define who you are and who you will be. And this is one of them. And the reason is because they are going to have to make a decision about their belief. So who do you serve exactly? So the next thing happens is kind of funny to me. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and I don't think they spoke as one. We don't know which one of them actually was a spokesperson. But the next thing they say cracks me up because it's Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful man on the planet, has just given them an ultimatum and is asking a question. It actually asked two questions. First, are you ready? And second was, who's going to save you? There's actually two questions there. And what they say is this, we don't have to answer you in this matter. O King Nebuchadnezzar, doesn't even say may you live forever. None of this stuff. He says, King Nebuchadnezzar, we don't even have to answer you in this matter. And I'm reading through that, and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. Did these three guys just flip off the most powerful man on earth? Because it kind of looks like they did here. Because he said, he said, you know what, we don't have to answer you. That wouldn't have worked with my mother when I was growing up. Oh, yes, you do, would have been the response my mother gave me. Right? Can you imagine trying out with a king who's actually got a fiery furnace right there to throw you in, has already threatened to throw you in? I don't have to answer your question. You kind of do. I'm the most powerful man on the planet. I asked you a question. You really do. But see, what's going on in their mind is they're still Jewish. And the Jewish government was set up differently. The Jewish government, the king ruled over all civil matters. This is a spiritual matter. What they're really telling him is, I don't need to answer you. You're the civil king and civil rules. Now, if this were simply a matter of court diplomacy, I think if Nebuchadnezzar had set up a chair and he was sitting on a dais and everybody had to come up, bow, and kiss the ring, I think they would have done it. They could swear loyalty to a king on earth. But this was a spiritual matter. Now, before you start thinking, oh, so Jews, they had separation of church and state. They didn't, because the king was subservient to the priest, who was subservient to God. That's how God set up his country. And we know this because if you look in the very first king that comes along, a guy named Saul, he's king and he has his kingship taken away. Why? Because he crosses this line. Saul starts offering sacrifices for the people, which isn't his job as the king, it's the priest's job. And as soon as he does that, God says, that's it, I'm taken away from you, and he brings David in. So they're split in the Judaism country. So when they say, we don't need to answer you this because this is really a spiritual issue, but then they go ahead and they will answer it. So they're actually just kind of starting here. But how do you do that? How do you get to the point where you're sitting in front of the most powerful person on earth who's going to throw you in a pit and you say, yeah, I don't even have to answer you, really, to tell you the truth. Listen, heroic acts are often just simple choices by ordinary people with unshakable beliefs. That's the thing. So I can't. Like to make it easy on all of us if we could do it, but we just can't. And there's nothing you can do to shake that belief. Now listen, simple is not easy. That's not the same thing. Something that's simple isn't easy. In fact, it's usually not. I've noticed in my life that most of the simplest things are the hardest to do, right? But here's why they can't do it. Because you can compromise your wants, your desires, and your dreams, but you cannot compromise the truth. Not you should not. I'm not saying you shouldn't do this. No, you cannot compromise the truth. You just can't. You can't compromise the truth. You can only begin to believe a lie. That's how truth works. Now, it's okay that sometimes what you want, what you desire, what you dream, you compromise. You know, I am old enough right now that I've compromised some dreams in my life. I am never going to play in a rock band. I'm never going to play quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's certain dreams I had when I was a little kid, you know. It's never going to happen. That's okay. And some things I had, dreams that I've compromised a little bit, you know, got some of it, not all of it. And that's okay. It's okay to compromise your wants and your desires. You get married, you'll learn about compromise, promise you. Marriage is all part of it, right? That's okay, but it's not the same thing as compromising a truth. You can't compromise your truth. You can only begin to believe a lie. Let me give you an example. If I say, hey, I really want a pizza, who can go down to Fox's and get me a pizza? I will pay you back whatever it costs. That's the deal. Okay, and you go down there, you come back, and give me my pizza. And you say it was $15. I look at my wallet, oh, well, here's 10. Well, you said you'd pay me back. That's what we said. Yeah, that's what I said. But here's 10. Well, the bill says 15. All right, let's compromise. Let's say 12. Now, if you accept that, what have you accepted? A lie, because that's not what you paid. Math is math. Now, I can accept that and say, well, I'll just compromise the truth here, but you said you'd pay me back what it cost me, and you're not. That's not a compromise. That is eroding of a truth. I am now believing a lie. You cannot compromise the truth, which is another way of saying God can't be God sometimes. Can't just be there sometimes. I'm going to just check out of being a Christian right now, bow here to this idol, and come back and check back into being a Christian. That's not how it works. God is God, or he isn't. So after they say, well, we really don't need to answer you at all, they go ahead and answer them. And they start with the second question first. They say this. They said, if you do this, you throw us in there, you ask us who could save us, I'll tell you who can save us. Our God can. You need to know, our God is good enough. The God whom we serve could deliver us from the burning, fiery furnace and deliver us from your hand. He could do that. Maybe he even will. But let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods. In other words, even if he doesn't, we will never bow our knee to your God. We just won't. It's not going to happen. In other words, they're kind of saying, we're going to save you the time and these musicians the trouble. We heard you the first time. We didn't do it there deliberately, and after thinking about it, we're not going to do it now. This is simply not going to change. And I want to stop on this because this is a picture, and this is why I think when Danny was writing his book, led by the Holy Spirit said, hey, don't forget to put that story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in here. Not even about me. Doesn't matter. This is really, really important because there is a truth here that the people need to get. And so it was recorded for our benefit because what has just happened is we see a perfect picture of faith, and here's what it looks like. God is certainly able. Maybe he will. But even if he doesn't, I will still serve him. See, that's not the picture of faith you'll see if you read the best-selling authors today. I'll save you the trouble. You don't have to read any of these people. This is not the truth they teach. Here's what they teach you. In order to get God to do what you want, you have to have faith. Now, the opposite of faith they'll teach you is doubt. So what you need to do is two things. You need to develop your faith, and you need to remove all doubt. Now, the way you develop your faith, in case you're wondering, is you do things called plant seeds. This is code for giving money to the ministry. So if you give money to the ministry, especially if it's money you don't really have, that's planting a seed of faith that God is going to water and produce in your life, right? This is all ways to get what you want out of God. You first have to give money to their ministry. And that's a seed of faith. And now we're going to teach you, as part of that, we're going to send you DVDs, and you're going to have access to our videos, and you can come to our conferences. We're going to teach you how to keep your faith and never have doubt. Because if you doubt one little thing, then it's all done. You need pure faith and no doubt. And if you do that, God has no choice but to give you what you want. That's kind of how it's taught, to be honest with you. I just summed up 4 books for you. You don't need to buy any of them. Here's the thing. Just as a general rule, millionaires who are living in palaces bought with other people's money don't know any idea what faith is. Really, they don't. You know who you need to go to? The only author that matters. That's the author of faith itself. And that is Jesus Christ. That's what the book of Hebrews says. Looking always to Jesus. He is the author and the finisher of your faith. If you want to know what faith looks like, you have to look at God's book, which, incidentally, I don't know if it matters to anybody, greatest selling book of all time, by far and away more than any of those best-selling authors who have the secret. Jesus says, no, that's not how this works. In fact, God wanted this put all the way back in the Old Testament so we would know this is a picture of faith. Our God certainly can. Maybe he even will. But even if he doesn't, I will always serve God. That's an amazing statement of faith. And they would say, no, you can't do that, because when you say this here, even if he does not, that's doubt. Right? And even the word maybe he will, that's doubt too. You've got to remove all that doubt. That's what they say in their books. But in God's book, he says, no, this faith here stirred heaven to move. Because they said, you need to understand something, Nebuchadnezzar. I'll burn on earth, but I'm not going to burn in heaven. I'm not going to burn when it's all over. And that's what Jesus comes by and says. Jesus says this. He says, look, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Is that good? Is that really a good thing? Is that a deal that you want to make? What will a man give in exchange for his soul? And then later, he says this, do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul. Rather fear him who is able to destroy both the soul and the body in hell. This is the teaching of the author and the finisher of your faith. So he's saying, don't fear Nebuchadnezzar. He can only kill you here. Stay true to me, and I'll give you everlasting life. And that's what they were believing. They said, I don't care what you can do to me here. God can certainly save us. He may even do it. By the way, we never see them pray about it. If they did, it's not in the Bible. They just simply declared their faith. God is able. Maybe he will. But even if he doesn't, he's still our God. And that idol right there, that's a fake God. And I'm not going to bow to that. I'm going to stay true to the real God. I don't know if you guys know who this is. Some of you my age probably do. There was a missionary who went to China in a very dangerous time. And his name was Jim Elliot. And they thought that if he went there, he probably would die. But he felt very strongly that God was calling him to go back into China. And so he left his wife behind, and he went to China, where he died. The reason we know all this is because his wife, Elizabeth Elliot, published his journal. And in it were amazing quotes, but this is one of my favorite. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. See, he had a 3-act play too. If you go to China, they're going to kill you. But God told me to go to China. But they're going to kill you. I have to obey my God. So they killed him in his 3rd act. See, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, if you guys know the story, they don't get killed. It's a great miracle. And sometimes God does deliver you. But even if he doesn't, is he still your God? That's really the question that's before. You can't determine how your story will end. You can only determine your next step. Is it going to be one of faith, or are we going to make deals with God? If you do this for me, I'll do this for you. But if you don't do this for me, I'm out. I know so many Christians who got angry at God because they didn't answer prayer. He didn't answer prayer. They said, well, I'm out then. Well, then who's God? really honestly, who is God if that's how that works? So they had made their decision a long, long time before all of this happened. There was no way out for them, but our faith is not in a God who does what we want. Our faith is in a God who knows what is best. So they'll get thrown into the fiery furnace, and like I said, you can read the rest of Daniel, and you can see that. But I want to jump forward now to another guy who had also these 3 acts. His name is the Apostle Paul. And he was on his way to Rome, and he actually had people come to him with prophetic word. I saw in prophecy that if you go to Rome, you're going to die. And you know what Paul told them? I saw that too. But I'm supposed to go. I'm supposed to go to Rome. God's sending me to Rome. And while there, he wrote a book called Romans, which is probably the greatest book of theology ever given to man. But he says this when he's talking to the Philippians. This is before Rome. He says, what am I going to choose? I don't know. I'm torn. I'm torn between these 2 things, he says. I desire to depart and be with Christ. That would be better by far. But it's more necessary for you that I remain now, because I'm still teaching you what God has taught me. So convinced of this, I know I'm going to remain, and I'll continue with you for all your progress and joy and faith. That's what he says. He says, I'm torn, though, to be honest with you. I almost wish I could die and go be with Jesus. That's what I want. But I'll stay here as long as God needs me to stay here. That's basically what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were saying. God has brought us here for a purpose. We don't know if that purpose is finished. If it's not, he's going to deliver us from your hand. There's nothing you can do to stop God's purpose, Nebuchadnezzar. Nothing. But if it's time to go, it's time to go. We'll go live with the heaven. We'll go live with the Lord. That's okay. That's better by far, Paul said. He'd actually had a taste of it. He'd seen it. He was swept up in the 3rd heaven briefly. You know, oh, that's waiting for me? I'd rather go there. See, our problem is that we have this kind of clock in our head. By this time I should do this. By this time God should do that. And if I'm going to move forward, I need to know that God's going to do this at this time. It's like when I was, I don't get to do this anymore, but I used to have television shows I'd watch. I'd like DVR them, play them back. And sometimes they get intense. You know, I can get swept into movies and things, and sometimes they get very intense for me. But if you put it on pause, it shows you how much time's left, you know. And I could tell by how much time was left what was going to happen in the movie now. Because, there's much time left. This isn't it, you know. They're going to get out of this. When we get down towards the end, though, and something's going on, it's like, well, this isn't going to be anything big because they got to end the movie here pretty soon. You have this clock in your head. And when you watch TV, it's even easier because it's a 60-minute block, 40 minus commercials. And you kind of get an idea in your head, by now this should happen. And we're going to finish this up. They've got the epilogue scenes for next week. You know, that's how things work. And so you got this in our head. And we got this with our lives. I'm this old now. By this time, this should have happened. By this time, if God wants to really do something in my life, this needs to happen. I need to be married by this time. I need to have kids by this time. I need to have a good career by this time. I need to have all this happen in time because I'm running out of time. Except the infinite God's never out of time. Moses was 80. God called him into ministry. 80. I can't even imagine. Abraham was 100 when he finally had the promise given to him. The infinite God is never out of time. He's not in our clock. And his clock goes past this life into the next. So he sees things that we don't even see. And we continually measure God's love based on what he's done for us. Now, look, I'm not telling you don't pray for miracles. I'm not telling you that God won't do miracles in your life. We've seen miracles in our body here. We've seen them happen. By all means, God says, cast your cares upon me. But is he still God to you if the answer is no? Can we believe in a God who sometimes doesn't give us what we want? Do we get angry with him and take it out on him somehow by walking away from him, which does hurt him but hurts us far more? How deep is our faith? Do we only look at what he does for us and is based on that? If I would believe that and could preach that, we'd be full. I know we would, because I look at the churches that preach that. God wants what's best for you. He's going to give you all your heart's desires. All you got to do is learn a secret, and all your prayers will be answered. But when we started Spirit Chapel, I made a deal with God. He probably gets amused by this. But we talked to a lot of people prior to starting the church. And I asked everybody who belonged to a church and wasn't going, why? Why aren't you going to church anymore? And the number 1 and 2 answers we got, they're always pressing me to join. I don't want to join. So we made a note, okay, no membership. Yeah, okay, what else is there? And the other thing was money. They're always asking for money. And so I said, okay, if we start a church, I was praying to God. I said, here's my conditions, as though he cares. Here's my conditions. We're not going to push membership. I guess we'll have it if people, we actually started because people asked to join. We didn't have a membership program. We actually created one because people asked. And you know, we never talked membership. And we have a box on the wall for you to give. We never pass a collection plate. We were in business for about 3 weeks, I guess, and somebody, came, smart man, said, you can make more money if we pass a plate. I said, okay, good to know. But that was my deal with God. If you're going to do this, you're going to pay for it yourself, God, because I'm not passing a plate. I'm not collecting money for you. It's going to be their heart's give, and that's it. And the third condition I gave him was I can't preach something I haven't lived. I've heard a lot of preaching in my life. A lot of it sounds really good. And they talk about how it's worked for them. I said, but I can't do that. I can't preach something I haven't lived. So I got to tell you, I've never lived that faith. That you just simply believe what you want and God gives you whatever you want. I haven't experienced that. What I've experienced is sometimes God says no. And sometimes he says no and you figure out why later. Oh, thank God. Garth Brooks has a great song, unanswered prayers. I thank God for unanswered prayers. Some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. I believe that. There are some times, thank God you didn't answer that prayer. But sometimes I'm just baffled. Why not that prayer? That prayer seemed like a good one. Why was the answer no? And I still don't know the answer to some of them. But at what point do we stop looking at God for just what he gives us and start looking at God for who he is and how much he loves us? I don't know if anybody's paying attention, but a couple weeks ago, there was a song I sang, and these were lyrics in that song. It was the end, so you guys are all probably clicked off by then. But I know God's love can't be measured by the prayers he answers for me. His love for me stretches to forever, and he provides all my needs. Sooner or later, it comes to trust. Can you put your faith in his love? Is God just something you think you feel, or do you know to your soul that he is real? I believed, therefore I have spoken. This is a faith that cannot be broken. That, I believe, therefore I have spoken, actually comes from 2 Corinthians 4:13. Here's the thing that you have to understand. There is an author and a finisher of your faith. And he's trying to write a story of his faith in you. And we have to follow what the Bible tells us that looks like. The author of your story needs no translator, because he writes it on your heart. I'm going to end with another song. I'm in a singing mood. Here's another song. It's a hymn. I've quoted from this before. Blind unbelief is sure to err and search his works in vain. God is his own interpreter. He will make it plain. Would you all please pray with me? Heavenly Father, we thank you that you are patient with us. We need to have the faith of Hananiah, Shemaiah, and Azariah. We need to be able to stand before the kings in our lives, knowing that they are not the king. Everybody who is an authority right now in this world is there at your discretion. You are the King of Kings. And we don't answer to them. We don't have to answer them. We don't have to explain ourselves to any of them. All we have to do is say, we serve the living God. What does he say? Teach us, Lord. Even if you don't do what we think you should, build in us a faith that presses on towards the goal. We ask this in